Hi, I'm Di Parker, the Good Grief Coach, and welcome to this very short presentation about why it's important for children to talk about grief and why they need to. First question I want to ask you is, what does grief mean to you? Now, with clients that I've had, there's two things. Some people understand that it is something that we do for every loss we experience, but most just think it's about a bereavement. But what does grief mean to you? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Talking about grief in a more open way. What generally stops a lot of us from talking is the fear of how it's going to be received by the person you're talking about to. You don't want to upset them. Understanding that it's a good thing to talk about grief, and that's where I'm coming from. Because grief is an emotion, it's not a process. A process means that there's a start, middle, and an end. Well, when you're triggered by something further down the line, what's that all about? So if you think it's going to finish in that short period of time, most people think, well, what's wrong with me? And do a number on themselves. So if you understand that it's an emotion and it can be triggered by any kind of memory, then you can take that pressure off yourself by understanding that it's actually an emotional journey. When we have an end to a familiar pattern of behavior, that is a loss. So something that you've done repeatedly in your life that you then stop doing is a loss. And it's just how attached you are to that loss as to how much you will grieve. Because we're taught how to gain things in life, but not what to do when we lose them. So this slide will show you some different types of losses that you can expect to experience in your lifetime. Obviously, death, then there's divorce, relationships, health issues, finances, and it can be career, whether you've had a promotion and you're leaving your team behind, or you've got to be somebody else in your head now. And that camaraderie that you had has just gone away. So those may be subtle things that you don't necessarily realize that there's an element of grief going on in that. Now, we also have it when we come to addictions, and people need to let go of an addiction that's been comforting them, and they're trying to work on that. There can be problems with that because they're grieving that attachment that they've had to that substance. So it's understanding that, then you can break that cycle and gently support yourself while you're coming out of those kind of things. The modern day losses that we have are family structures. We've got parents now that have decided that they want to divorce and they've gone on to new relationships, and we have more blended families. Um, so your children could possibly be doing joint custody, which is great because they're seeing both parents, but it means they're in this place for X amount of days a week, and then in this place for X amount of days a week. So the security that one might have had as a family unit that's changed, and it might be for good reasons that it's changed. For the children, they're trying to work out where they fit into all of this, but they'll push these emotions down inside. And that is what came to the surface when I indeed was putting this together with my co-authors. The biggest one that we can ever have for ourselves, though, is loss of trust. When you've trusted somebody to be there for you, and then you find out that they aren't. And that's a really hard one to try and come to terms with. And the judging of that person might come into the equation. And we'll kind of talk around and work around that when we're in the program as well. But we're estimated up to 42 losses in our lifetime. So it's about time we knew tools and strategies to help us when these things pop up in our lives. So when I asked my partners, two children, what does grief mean to them? Both of them said to me, what's grief again? And I was actually very shocked at this because I knew they'd had all of these issues around the divorce and moving between the houses, but they had lost animals. They had lost grandparents, but there's been no conversation around them. So I thought, this is an opportunity, and I asked them if they would both help me put this book together, and they just jumped at that. But I also knew it was going to be helping heal them. So each module in the book has got a lesson plan. All of this has been verified by a retired head teacher who's put a nice testimonial in the book for me in the foreword, who's also been through my grieving program for adults and had extra coaching. So she knows what's going on in this program as well. First-hand experience is always good, isn't it? So as you can see from this example of the module on lesson plan 1, I've got it stated what's required, the action that you're going to need to do, and outcome. Where I've got more complicated bits in the program, I have actually done a supporting video to that, so you don't need to worry about how you would deliver that to the child. This is what we cover. What is grief? Let's start at the basics. What do they actually understand about grief? Have they had conversations with you about it? Have you touched on it? How much of that went in? This is where you can open up that conversation and find out. Then understanding what grief is, as I've explained to you just now. How attached you are to whatever loss you've experienced will determine on how much you grieve. So it's explaining that to the children. The way I do it is talk about happiness, because that's feels lighter to start the conversations off. But I say, like, a comedian will tell you a joke, but there's usually a warm up to the big joke. It's very rare that you'll just start laughing straight away, unless it's somebody like Lee Evans who's fallen over and it just gets you going. But it's it's about knowing that there are stages to this, which is easy enough to do. No, that's a good joke, Di, all the rest of it. To actually, that's really quite funny. So it's explaining that grief works the same way. When we ask about what the adults have told you about grief up to now, again, it's just backtracking a little bit on what they actually understand, how was it addressed to them, and so that they can explore that further. We cover acting, anger, and comparing. So when somebody's acting out saying that they're fine and they're not, children know that as well. So it's explaining what that's all about, how we store anger in our bodies, and it's looking for an outlet. Now, this is where people think children are resilient, and actually they're struggling with these feelings. And that was the case in my partner's son, and he was holding it all inside. And I used to laugh and call him my little Tasmanian devil, because you'd be like, come in, like, but going through this program, he was starting to put words to the feelings and emotions that were coming up. And he just, I could just see him deflate, relax as he was making those connections. She was frightened that if Dad had somebody in his life, would he then not see me? So it was fabulous to have that space open up for us to have these deep conversations and explore what actually was going on for them, and then address it. Now we have that situation whereby we can sit down and talk about anything that is kind of big that we need to. And then comparing, children will compare all the time. We do as adults, and it's sort of bred in you from when you were little. You might have been compared to siblings. When you went to school, you'd be compared to your classmates. And so it's getting that again unpicked to say the only person you should ever compare yourself is yourself. So if you got a PB in a race, next time you look to up that, you don't worry about the fast athlete was doing. Or I used to do triathlon. There's no way I'd catch up with any of the ones in the start, but I would just keep looking at what I did last time and had I managed to beat that time. So if you can bring it back down to that, it'll take the pressure off yourself, especially if you're somebody like me who's lost my husband. If another widow saw me now in a new relationship, could make assumptions that I'm over my husband and that I've moved on. So just to address those two things, you do not get over somebody that you have loved and lost. You find a way of living your life without them physically with you, but they will always be with you in your heart. You do not move on. So there's judgment and in this comparing that we address, and which needs to be looked at. And it's great for the kids because they compare themselves all the time, don't they? They're on their socials doing all of this. And when I catch these two doing it now, I just give them a little poke on the shoulder and I'll say, you're unique. There is only one of you. So why are you comparing yourself? And that usually gets a little smile and then, yeah, okay, I shouldn't compare myself to that person. So we can have a bit of a laugh about that. And then guilt. That's a word that is misused in our English language because we are guilted and from from when we're little. Guilt is something you should feel if you have taken the life of another person. That's guilt. But what we tend to do is we apply it to everything. You should not necessarily do a number on yourself with guilt if you didn't go and see your gran or finish your dinner. That's not what it's about. So when I tell clients this and I explain this to them, I'll ask them, so you know that, what's the emotion that's coming up for you underneath guilt? Because guilt will keep you stuck. So if you realize what guilt actually means, what's coming up? Now, two things generally come up: that they're sad or they're fearing the future without that person in it. And I can relate to that one because to start with, I was very fearful of my future without my husband in it. And I've been a part of him 32 years of marriage. We can then unpick that and it kind of brings it down a level to something that somebody can actually manage. Oh, yes, that's right. I'm actually feeling sad. I can free myself from the guilt because I understand I'm feeling sad. Or the other way, it's like, okay, I'm going to face this fear. What do I need to do to help myself through this fearful time? And then I round all of it up with a complete review and quiz. Now, in this, I've also got an NLP module so I can show the children how they take information in, how they store it, how it then is held in the body to become a physical reaction. So if you see something you like, you'll move towards it. If you see something you don't like, you'll move away from it. So I explain all of that in there. How, if we hold a thought for 17 seconds, it attaches to another, to another, to another. And I use ice cream as an example in this course because it's a nice thing, isn't it? Ice cream. Unless, of course, you're allergic to dairy, in which case it's not a nice thing. So it would go down that other way. But it's to teach them that you're in, you are not your thoughts. And a thought is only something that can create a belief if you keep thinking that thing. And when you unpick it all, you can start questioning some of the beliefs that you've got by educating yourself further. The myths are generally beliefs that you've been told about or conversations you might have heard. Don't feel sad. When somebody you've loved and lost has gone, whether they've died or they've left you or an animal's died, and somebody tells you not to feel sad, what else are you supposed to think? How are you supposed to feel? Of course, you're going to feel sad. So you can take that pressure off you straight away and you can have a good cry if you need to, or just acknowledge it. Replacing the loss, say a child loses a hamster. That's the example I've used in the book. And a parent will come in and say, oh, stop crying. We'll get you another one in the weekend. It's an opportunity for you to sit down and say to the child, I am so sorry for your loss. Can you tell me about your little friend? And they can start sharing with you their feelings and feel that they're being heard, which will help ease that pain. Because generally, what happens is a well-meaning parent too might bring in a biscuit or some food and say, oh, it's awful, here, eat this, you'll feel better. So this well-meaning person has said, of authority, I am going to feel better if I eat this. So they start eating, they'll feel different, but they won't feel better. What happens then is later on in life, we're looking for that something that is going to make us feel better. So whether it's food or whether it's wine, sometimes it's over exercising or retail therapy. So we look at all of those things because they are things that we do to comfort ourselves. In this case, we call them STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors, so that we can make ourselves feel better. Grieving alone needs to be watched, because if you've got somebody that'll take themselves off to the bathroom or something to have a cry, or the bedroom, that's fine if they say, I need some space. But if they're going to be in there a long time, that can be an issue, because it can extend into not leaving the house. And then you've got another issue to deal with. I know that when I lost my husband, I did the opposite. I kept telling people when they're saying, like, would you come with us? And I was always saying yes. And I actually ended up sort of burning myself out a little bit, because I was so frightened if I said no that they may not ask me again. So I kept going out and out and out. But that's what I was doing. I just I didn't want to put myself in that situation where I would be on my own, because loneliness is it's one of those deep rooted things that can keep a person stuck for a long time. So let's look and explore it and talk about that, and then the children will have an avenue in which to share their sadness. And if they need to be left for a bit, you can say, right, okay, I'll give you 20 minutes or so, and then I'll come in and check on you. Time as a healer, it's another big myth, isn't it? Because if that was the case, then why am I seeing clients who are holding on to grief for 20 odd years? So time is certainly not a healer. There's a lovely example of this in the manual that I learned from, to say that you get a puncture and you sit there and you say, okay, I'm going to sit and meditate, and the air will flow back into this tire and I will be on my way. Now, you know that's not going to happen. You know you've got to take that tire off, you've got to fix it, and then put it back on again. Your heart is no different. Did you know that the pain of loss can be picked up on an ECG machine? There's actually a blip that will come up and show the person reading it that you are grieving. So it's not a figment of anybody's imagination. It's a physical thing, and it certainly felt like somebody had stuck a knife in my heart at the time. So, you know, it's be mindful of that when you're talking to people that are grieving indeed. And then be strong. Well, take the pressure off yourself. You do not need to be strong. It's time for people to be allowed to support you. So if you're in a grieving situation right now, I hope that that will help you. But it's given the children the opportunity to say and talk around that, not having to be strong for mum or dad, or, you know, this is the sort of thing that they might get told, is you have to be strong for your mum now. And that's just too much pressure for somebody. My late husband actually said that to one of my sons, and I could see him struggling so much. And when I finally got it out of him, he said, Dad's told me I need to look after you. And I said, well, I can understand why he said it, but it's not your job to look after me. It's my job to look after me. You've got enough to look after yourself and your now growing family. So it's important that you can help them understand that. And it's just a myth that you don't want to be saying to anybody. And then keep them busy. Well, a lot of people will do anything. They'll clean a house top to bottom, but they won't sit down and talk to you about their grief. And this is why this is important to me, because I want to get people talking about it and not sort of having this stigma hanging over themselves that they feel that they can't express themselves. And to help all of that in this too, I tell you what to say and what not to say, so that it'll help start those conversations off with somebody and give the children tools. And my co-author has already done this. He was able to go and have a conversation with somebody who'd lost their auntie. So it's a great thing to have for the kids to have. This is the kind of thing that when we talk about holding a thought for 17 seconds, attaching to another, this is an example of what I'm talking about there. You know, the child sitting at the classroom desk, great, it's sunny. I'll be able to play rugby later. We're away soon on tour, and let's hope we're going to bring that cup back. So what happens if the plane doesn't go? They don't get the cup. These are things that they can be taught on how to deal with these emotions. And so this is what we talk about. But ultimately, it comes down to our hopes, dreams, and expectations. We have a hope. When I married my husband, I had the hope we're going to be happily married and have our children. The dream, that was the dream, and it happened. But the expectation I had was that we would, you know, see old age together and see our grandchildren growing up and all the rest of it. And it didn't happen. And that's the key of this, is we have these set plans in our heads sometimes, our expectations. So if they don't work out, we can be triggered all over the place with these things. I'm teaching the children also to respond to what's happening in life instead of reacting. And I've got some fun ways of explaining that in this book. Hi, I'm Diane Parker, and this is one of my co-authors here of this programme, Brogan Byers, who, with his sister Tegan, very kindly offered to be my co-producers of this, because as I was talking and taking them through this programme, we were going through it in real time and putting all the pieces together. So I'm extremely grateful to you for that, Brogan. So the first question I asked you was, what is grief?
Whenever you asked me what is grief, I said, I don't know what grief is. I haven't heard of it before.
And that shocked me a lot, because I know that Brogan has had some significant losses in his life. So when I came to explain what grief was, what did you identify? Parents divorcing was one, wasn't it?
Yeah, parents were divorcing, moving schools, moving house, and dogs just moving on, and sometimes cats as well.
Yeah. So when I met Brogan too, he was, I used to nickname him the Tasmanian Devil, because he'd come like into the house. But when we were doing this program, I could actually see Brogan changing in the way you were feeling when you made the connections. I mean, obviously, this is a very condensed offering of what this program's going to go through. But when we were going through the bits and pieces, I could actually see the penny dropping, and Brogan became more relaxed. So, what is grief?
Grief is an emotion that if someone is grieving alone, they're doing an emotion that crying or just sad. And
they're kind of myths that people think they have to do, isn't it? Is to grieve alone, because we talked about the myths. And then Brogan, you identified that you did a few of those things, didn't you?
Yeah. If my mum and dad were like divorcing, and they were probably like, and in the middle of it, I'd go to my room and just maybe put some earplugs in so I don't hear it, and just listen and watch YouTube or do other things.
Yeah, distract yourself.
Yeah.
Some people keep themselves busy, and some people go to the swings.
Yeah.
You did that too, didn't you?
Yeah.
I believe your sister walked the dog a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything that you would like to share with everybody here that would help? Like when you feel sad, what did I get you to do?
You got me to tell dance around to make you happy and
make you feel better, make you feel better quicker. It's okay to identify. I mean, obviously, if grandma dies or something, it's not big, but if you're just feeling a bit heavy with I don't know, maybe the day's not going the way you had hoped, you don't have to stay in that space. And I showed you how to change your state quickly, which changes the way you feel quickly, which was to dance. That's right. But was there anything else you would like to share here with others to help us with the understanding that you've taken from doing this whole program with me?
Just don't ask people if they're grieving alone. Are you okay? Ask them, how are you feeling? Because that would be more better.
Okay. And then what would you do if they said, no, I don't want to talk?
You would still sit there and just maybe be there for them in case they start talking. And if they start talking, really listen to what they're saying.
That's great. And it's not your job to make them feel better, is it? It's just to sit and listen. But we talk about that a lot in the chapters. Brogan, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this and helping so many other people that you're probably never going to meet, but you'll have touched them and helped them make some significant changes in their lives, because you can see now, can't you, understanding this stuff, how it's going to make out for a different path going forward.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So there you are. The booklets look like this. We've got the adult's handbook and we've got the workbook for the children. So they haven't got the lesson plans in their workbook. And there's also the video links for the more complicated bits that we have to talk about. Obviously, this is just a quick overview of what is in this program. It goes a lot deeper into each chapter, and I hope that you will think about joining me very shortly as we embark on our course. So thank you very much. If there's any questions that you might have, then please do reach out. I'm only too happy to talk to you about grief. I'm Di Parker, the Good Grief Coach. Bye now.